Tango ekomaka, kaina komi moto, ona bango.
But more important, our colleagues from Eswatini, we have responded. Busi Maisela, from the president of the Swaziland First Democratic Front, Emmanuel Langamandla, the Treasurer General of the Multi-Stakeholders Forum, and Mulungusi Makanya, the president of PEDUMO. I also want to pay a word of acknowledgement to Mark Haywood, who's one of our speakers today, and from whom we borrowed the title, Who Killed Thulani Maseko, a beautiful article in Daily Maverick. And thank you, Mark, for allowing me to plagiarize that title. But it is both the title and the contents of that article do inform this discussion, because it's not just about the assassination of Thulani Maseko. That is the main purpose of this discussion. But it is also about the nature and the content of the society in which was gunned down, which, like another Zimbabwe, is one in which the state does not tolerate opposition, let alone opposing views. These are the societies in which the state regards and treats opposition movements as enemies to be vanquished, rendering farcical the pretense to democracy. And therefore, as we honor this young man, one of our heroes, whose name was known throughout the region and beyond, the response of the region was so enormous, enough to let us know how great this man was. Some of us were angry, and we turned anger into careful reflections, considerations of where we go from here, beginning with the situation in Eswatini, but look at also the region in general. And as Mark has beautifully done in his article, goes beyond that. It is not just a question of the capability of those that mete out this kind of violence. It's also about those who stand by and watch and listen and do nothing about it, whether it's the region so-called SADC, whether it's the hegemonic countries like South Africa, whether it is the AU, and indeed whether it is the international community as a whole. We need all of us to take responsibility. And Thulani is not the first to be murdered. I dare say there have been many murdered in the manner in which this young man has been taken. And given the nature of our societies that we are talking about, Thulani may not be the last. So on that note, I welcome Mark Haywood, the editor of Daily Maverick, to lead us into the discussion. Mark.
Good evening, friends and comrades, and thank you, Ibo, for that introduction. Thank you too for organizing this policy dialogue this evening to pay tribute to our friend Thulani, but also to try to understand fully the meaning of his death and what must flow from it. I certainly, as you mentioned, if you are to measure the outpouring of respect, the statements, the resolutions that have been made since his murder, you might think that this assassination could be a turning point for democratic struggles in Swaziland, as well as in other countries of the region. But I think perhaps my main argument tonight will be that whether it becomes a turning point is very much dependent on us. It's very much dependent upon what lessons we learn from this and what actions we take following upon it. Will it be back to business as usual within a few weeks or a few months? Or will this be the catalyst or one of the catalysts to change? But before I start my input, I think it's proper that I start with condolences to the family of Thulani, to Tanele, his wife, to his children, to his comrades, some of whom are with us this evening on this call. It is a terrible loss. I also want to just thank those people, including, again, people who are with us this evening, who in the midst of grief and shock at this murder went into action to organize a fitting farewell to a hero, his memorial and funeral on Saturday and Sunday morning in Swaziland. Organizations like the Southern African Human Rights Defenders Network and colleagues who traveled from across the region, from Mozambique, from Botswana, from Zambia, from Zimbabwe, at some risk to themselves, as well as colleagues in Swaziland itself who attended the funeral, because there was no question that we had to bury Thulani with full honors. And as I said in my introduction, if you look at the outpouring, the statements of everybody from the Secretary General of the United Nations, the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner, leaders of some governments, of course, not all governments, diplomats, trade unions, churches, judges, lawyers, activists, friends, then you can understand the respect with which Thulani Maseko was held. So, Hambagatle, Thulani, you were a friend of mine, you were a friend of many of ours. and you fought the good fight to advance democracy and justice and human rights. I want to make my comments to this discussion under 4 headings, and they are as follows. I want to say a few words just on why Thulani Maseko was assassinated. From there, I want to reflect on the wider environment, social and political environment for democracy activists within this, this region. The question that was asked when SAPES put out this invite to this webinar is whether Eswatini is leading or following the regional trend in dealing with opposition. I think there's a fairly easy answer to that, which it is just manifesting a trend that is deepening of intolerance and oppression of activists. But I want to reflect on that environment. I want to, as the third thing, say a few words about who killed Thulani Maseko and what we must still get to the bottom of. And finally, say something about what follows and what is to be done going forward. So let me just start on perhaps the obvious thing about why Thulani was murdered. In my view, with hindsight, and hindsight is always easy, Thulani's assassination was an assassination waiting to happen. We should have anticipated the dangers. We should have done more to protect people like Thulani. And in that respect, we failed, but I will come back to that. The last few times that I had discussions with Thulani and asked him about what was happening in Swaziland, Eswatini, he kept on talking about there's an impending explosion, that if democratic reform continues to be blocked, that if repression continues, that an explosion of anger and violence becomes inevitable. And I've seen similar statements in recent days. And much of Thulani's efforts at negotiation, his role as the chairperson of the multi-sector forum, his role as a lawyer, was aimed at finding a negotiated settlement that would be radical and far-reaching and transformational, but which would also prevent that implosion, that explosion of violence. And I think to the people who are on this discussion tonight, the reasons for that are obvious. The socio-economic situation in Swaziland is unbearable to the majority of people who live there. 60% of people living below the poverty line, having been hammered by HIV for several decades, now by COVID-19, and then, of course, by the excesses and corruption of the regime and of the king and of his acolytes. There comes a point where people can't bear that poverty any longer, and that's when things snap and when you get uprisings. And it was that combined with democratic expectations that led, I think, perhaps unpredictably, but on the other hand, predictably, to the uprising of June 2021, June the 29th, 2021, and beyond, but also to the very brutal response to that uprising that led to the deaths of at least 80 protesters, people who were peaceful protesters, protesting for democracy, protesting to support the petitions, protesting for reform, trying to work within the very limited democratic ambit of the constitution of Swaziland. But it was brutal, and the brutality created a stalemate. Again, when I've spoken, and the comrades from who are here from Swaziland will speak to this far more knowledgeably than I will be able to, but when I've talked to activists over the last few months and years about what is happening, including to Thulani, their response has been that the thirst for democracy is not gone, the thirst for reform, the thirst for change, but that people are fearful because of the conduct of the police, because of the kidnappings, because of the imprisonment of 2 MPs, because of other assassinations that have continued. And again, we all know Thulani's name, but we must not forget that Thulani is not the only person who's died at the hands of this this regime. But I think it's very unfortunate that, and I'll continue with this theme later in this introductory remarks, that the combination of repression together with the neglect of the leaders of SADC, the SADC Troika, meant that it has been possible for the king to postpone the national dialogue that had been offered, and to postpone the prospect of reform, and to maintain the status quo, the completely unacceptable, unequal status quo in that country. In many ways, the people of Swaziland were left alone to deal with this crisis without the solidarity of either governments or the solidarity of civil society and mass organizations from other parts of the region. And I think this is the context that made Thulani a threat. And I keep on thinking, why was Thulani singled out for assassination? And it strikes me that the reason is because Thulani was tied to the democratic movement, to the ordinary people, to the aspirations of ordinary people. He was trusted by ordinary people. But he was also a threat because he was able to frame democratic demands in terms of rule of law, in terms of international law, in terms of human rights, in terms of an architecture of international law that ultimately failed him, but which, if it is properly utilized, is a threat to authoritarian dictators like Mswati. So it was that combination of qualities, connectedness to movement, but also unique abilities as a lawyer, as a person, as a strategist, that was behind what happened last Saturday night. But others will reflect further on that. But as I said, moving on to my second point now, that Thulani's death, in a sense, should be a wake-up call to what we all know exists, let's be clear, which is the toxic broth that now exists for democracy activists. The pendulum has swung against human rights because of geopolitical things as much as because of regional factors. But at times we continue as journalists, as activists, to behave as if the ground has not shifted or is not shifting from underneath us. And why do I say that? And I've listed, I think, 5 or 6 different factors that we should take into consideration. The first is that there's no doubt, and this has been identified for some time, that there is a deliberate shrinking of what is called civic space in many countries in the SADC region across the world. It's a global trend. Civic space is being shrunk by rule by law, not rule of law, rule by law. So such as the Private Voluntary Organizations Bill, which has now been, I believe, passed by the Senate in Zimbabwe today or yesterday as well. So it's a combination of legal and inverted commas means and illegal means. And this is something that is evident across the region. It varies from country to country, and it varies within countries. In South Africa, where I'm sitting this evening in Johannesburg, there's reasonable freedom for civil society for the most part. But at the same time as I'm talking, activists from the Amadiba Crisis Committee on the west coast of the former Transkei, Nonhle Mbatuma and others are saying that they know that there is a hit out for them because of their opposition to mining in that area. So you can't even say that a country like South Africa has a uniformly safe, protected civic space. On the other hand, there are countries which are at the far end of no civic space, or regions, Cabo Delgado in northern Mozambique, obviously Eswatini, obviously Zimbabwe, and other countries. But this is a factor that we have to contend with across the region, and that makes democracy activists more vulnerable. The second factor that I would point to in the environment is state capture of one form or another in most countries in the region. We talk about state capture as if it's unique to South Africa. I think that it was pioneered in Zimbabwe and Mozambique before it came to South Africa. In Swaziland, you obviously have a state that is captured because it is the king and the regime. Who the capturers are depends from government to government. With the assistance of some of the comrades on this call, we've researched and published information about the capture by cartels in Zimbabwe, capture of the economy by cartels in Zimbabwe, which continues. The same story exists in Mozambique. And it is this capture of the economy by elites which is creating conditions for rebellion, because poverty and inequality is driving people to rebellion, but it's also leading to the repressive response of many of these governments that we are seeing. Then there's the institutional failure. It doesn't need too much talking about, of the Southern African Development Committee, the Boys Club of now authoritarian, anti-democratic former liberation leaders, the undermining of multilateralism and human rights that has been led by the United States and Britain and has given freedom to Putin in Ukraine, but which starts in some ways with people like George Bush and Tony Blair and the Iraq war in the early 2000s, but it has broken respect for multilateralism and has consequently fed the rise of impunity. And alongside the rise of impunity goes the shrinking of accountability and fear. The fact of the matter is that Mswati must have known that all fingers would understandably point to him for killing Thulani. Did that hold him back? Did it make him afraid? Was he worried about repercussions, about sanctions, etc.? Clearly not, because they went ahead with this with this killing. And that's a dangerous situation when you can kill political opponents with impunity, as we're seeing in Zimbabwe, as we've seen in Durban in South Africa, at Eswatini, 24 lead activists of the Abahlali Basemjondolo murdered in the last few years. Nobody in prison for those killings. And then the last thing that I would say is the geopolitics that we now exist in. Many of us here have been activists for decades. We will remember the wave of human rights reform that swept the 1990s into the early 2000s, the democratic constitutions, the constitutional amendments in Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, South Africa, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that wind is blown in the other direction now, and there are plenty of authoritarian states for governments like that of Eswatini to lean on. And it's no coincidence that last week, within days of Thulani's murder, the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov visited the king, made promises of security assistance. It's no mistake, no coincidence that Swaziland is sending police to Russia for training and so on. And again, I think in many countries in the region, you can point to similar things. Mozambique in relation to Rwanda, the quid pro quo for having Rwanda in northern Mozambique is freedom for Rwanda to chase down its exiles in southern Africa and to assassinate its exiles. That is what is going on. That is what has been documented. So that's the very difficult environment in which we now operate. And I've kind of stressed, and I hope I haven't depressed people by overstressing the negatives in this environment, but they are largely, I would say, negatives that face us at the moment. Across the region, of course, there are movements for democracy, and there are successes, such as in Zambia last year with the electoral victory again of removing Edgar Lungu. But we're going to have to do a lot of work if the democracy movement is to have any successes in this period ahead. So coming to the third point I wanted to make, and I'll finish in a few minutes, who killed Thulani Maseko? As I said in my article, King Mswati III killed Thulani Maseko by the regime that he has created. And even if he didn't order it himself, the people who carried it out, who plotted it, must have known that it was with his tacit or explicit approval. The evidence is being gathered, and some of it is in the public domain already, and more we will publish in coming days that show that the police were just down the road from Thulani's house at the time of his killing. 2 police vehicles show that there was another vehicle on the dirt road beside his house, and that a military rifle was used to execute him. So I don't think that anybody can be at any doubt what was behind this assassination. But the point that I tried to make in the article that Ibo spoke to was that Thulani's assassination was made possible by catastrophic system failure, catastrophic human rights system failure by the AU, failure by SADC, failure to restore the SADC tribunal after it was dismantled nearly a decade ago, failure by the so-called human rights governments, the European Union, the United States, who for their own reasons have continued to treat this regime with kid gloves because they have material interests, investments, geostrategic interests of their own in Swaziland, and because they're not prepared to stand up openly in defense of the democracy that they claim to be the carriers of around the world. But the last thing that I said in my article was that I think we are responsible for Thulani's assassination as well, because it has been civil society weaknesses that allow these regimes to continue. You know, I feel as a South African activist, somewhat ashamed of the way solidarity with Swaziland blows hot and cold all of the time. People show solidarity at moments of extreme pain in that country and then drop the baton again. And we know by now that when you drop the baton, power just resorts to its original template. We could have done more. And for me, it reflects the fact that divisions, that territorialism, that the loss of traditions of solidarity, etc., have consequences, and those are challenges that we are going to have to pick up now that we've had this terrible loss of a friend as a consequence of what has happened. So what is to be done? As I said at the beginning, and I'll finish here, we really must ensure justice for Thulani Maseko. We really must not just make lip service that there should be an internationally supervised, independent investigation into his murder. It's not just something that we should say, something that we should find ways to demand. Every single SADC leader, almost, including Cyril Ramaphosa, has now said that that is what has happened. How do we make sure that that is what happens, and that they are not able to forget that they made a commitment that that is something that must happen? But Thulani himself would be the first to say that it's not just about Thulani Maseko. Thulani, the last times that I talked with him, was telling me about the work that he was doing as a lawyer, the investigations, the possible civil cases that were being prepared for people who were tortured, wounded, and murdered from June 2021 onwards. There's a lot of people who need justice at this moment as we stand, Thulani and many others. And there are people in prison at this moment. I mean, it's shocking that the two MPs should still be in prison. It's shocking that Job Sikala should still be in prison in Zimbabwe after so many months. If we allow this to happen, then it just encourages the impunity. So what do we do? I believe academics, activists, journalists need to develop more sophisticated systems for monitoring, for sharing information, for being able to act quickly on information parallel to our governments. We need, as I said, more solidarity. We need to identify governments in the region who we particularly need to put pressure on. I believe that South African government needs particular pressure to understand the need to resolve the democratic question that exists in Swaziland. And I believe that South African civil society has a particular responsibility to put pressure on the South African government to make sure that it does that, is not allowed to forget this issue. And then the last thing that I would say in the context of elections in Zimbabwe in 2023, in 2 or 3 months, 3 or 4 months, and the election in South Africa in a year, is that Democrats obviously have to engage democratic issues and democratic power and electoral politics. I'm not an expert on Zimbabwe, but again, talking to people in this room, my sense, again, is that the Zimbabwe election is going to be a difficult election. And it's something we should all be paying attention to. So Ibo asked me to speak for 20 minutes. I didn't think I would speak for 20 minutes. I'm sorry, it was 23 minutes or something, but I hope that that is sufficient to frame this evening's analysis, and particularly discussion of what we need to learn and do to honor Thulani Maseko and to prevent other leaders in the region, and I won't name them, but I think of Adriano Nuvunga in Mozambique, who was sent bullets last year, and who's been driving legal processes around the extradition of the finance minister. There's many vulnerable people we have to protect. Otherwise, there will be more killings. Thank you, colleagues and comrades. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for covering the ground so well. Just before you depart, just one or two questions. The first, maybe before that, I want to join you as well and all of us here in acknowledging the presence of the Maseko family. I see a number of people who joined us, and through them to convey our sincere condolences to the rest of the family. And I hope that this forum offers some modest condolences, one might say. But Mark, my question is, there was a SADC special summit a day or two ago. I was able to listen to the official opening. Beyond the quantification that constituted most of gang of statement, there was mentioned that the special summit was called because of the situation in Eswatini. Have you been able to elicit anything more than that as to what resolution might have been and what reference there might have been to this terrible murder of Thulani Maseko?
Thank you, Bo. There, as you correctly say, there was a summit. There was explicit reference to this terrible murder in the statement. There's been subsequent reference by Cyril Ramaphosa. A number of heads of government have spoken on this issue, including Namibia, South Africa, Zambia, to address it. But again, the problem is it's not clear what concrete actions will follow, just like the opaqueness around the process to a national dialogue and the lack of anything concrete being demanded or put on the table. We have the same situation here. The SADC heads of government have instruments at their disposal to address this. Why couldn't they themselves initiate an investigation into this, for example? I mean, they're heads of government, after all. I mean, we suffer because we don't have the SADC tribunal, which was deliberately closed down. But I fear, until proven otherwise, that they were forced to comment on it because of the outrage and the outcry and the media that has taken place on this. But whether they will do anything about it will be dependent upon whether we can keep this issue from going cold again.
I'll come back to you, but I think we need to leave this meeting with some kind of resolution, including, in my view, that we petition the new chair of the Troika, President Hichilema of Zambia, who took over on Tuesday. But we must leave here with some kind of resolution. On that note, I want to bring in Busi and Busi Maisela. Busi, in addition to what you have to say, what do you expect of us? Us in the region and beyond. What shall we do beyond just expressing our condolences and honoring, as we do, Thulani this evening? Busi? Welcome, Busi. Welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon and good evening, fellow comrades. I just want to say, first, I want to pass my sincere condolences. I understand we have in our midst some of the Maseko family, and I think it is one of the most difficult topic to speak to when we are speaking about a life that was tragically lost the way it was, And we can only just imagine how they feel about Thulani, the way they'd lost him, the wife and the kids and the family at large. So I want to take this time and pass my sincere condolences. I thank the previous speaker. I think he elaborated well on the issues of Swaziland and what is going on right now in Swaziland in regard to the impasse between government and the people of Swaziland that are demanding democracy. Yes, I was part of the delegation that was crashed the meeting, or basically the meeting, the SADC meeting that was the special summit that was in Namibia a day ago. I am aware, as the previous speaker has alluded, that nothing concrete came out from that meeting, unfortunately, except that the leaders from the other countries did mention that Swaziland needs to push towards the dialogue, which we hope, if it happens, is going to be the step to the right direction for correction of the issue in the country. But I think by mentioning that Swaziland government must work towards giving dialogue to Swazis, it doesn't actually push government to do anything about it. We know this issue is not new. The issue of dialogue has been ongoing for about almost 2 years now, from the time when we had the uprising in June 2021, and we had a delegation from SADC that came to the country, and we were hoping that from that delegation we were going to get something concrete, or something that was going to make King Mswati and the government to really prioritize the issue of dialogue. Unfortunately, nothing has really happened, and we've had lame excuses after another from government, even saying they are unable to have a dialogue because there's conflict. Yet the reason why we want the dialogue is because there's conflict. So they are saying the situation in the country is not conducive for dialogue, but yet they are able to have other cultural activities in the country, yet they are failing to give Maswati what they need, which is the dialogue. So I think from this platform and from the international friends of Maswati, we are appealing and advocating for support in terms of putting a spotlight on the plight of Maswati, and pushing government to make a move before more lives are lost. We were not, if the dialogue was granted, I'm hopeful that we're not going to lose Thulani the way we did. And Thulani is not the only one. We have lost many Maswati. Just before Thulani was murdered, another member of SFDF, which is my party, was also abducted and killed by the state. So this means now seeing the following day in Swaziland as a political activist, or someone that is publicly coming out to call for democracy, seeing the following day is luxury. It's you can't know when they are going to come and kill you. So we are really appealing for the international bodies and like SADC, AU, and EU to really prioritize the issue of Swaziland before more lives are lost. So I am hoping that even we can even have the country shut down by the other countries for trade. I think that's what we need to have as a resolution. But I think, as I'm saying that, I am even doubting. That's why it's difficult to come out, because we are talking about an economy that is already failing. We have Maswati, over 60% of Maswati living below the poverty line. So the situation in the country is dire, but we need something really hard to put government to the right mind to make a decision to give Maswati what they want.
Busi, what do you expect to happen in the next few months, few weeks? What is it? What is the nature of the solution that your party and others, democratic activists, are seeking in the not distant future? What kind of settlement are you looking for? What do you expect? What are you fighting for? What was Thulani fighting for beyond just defending activists, defending human rights activists? What is the nature of the alternative society, alternative government that you are looking for in Eswatini?
Basically, we are looking for a multi-party democracy where Swazis will have the right to choose their own government. And we are also looking for a country where the powers and the authority is going to move from the king or to move from one man and rest with the Swazis. By that, we expect once we have a government that we have chosen by ourselves as Swazis, we are going to have accountability from government. At the moment, there is no accountability. Everything is failing from the government side, and we cannot even question anyone because everyone that is on the positions is basically accountable to one man and one man only, that is the king. So that is going to be achieved by unbanning the political parties in the country. As you know, in 1973, we had a decree that banned political parties in Swaziland. That's why we are speaking, we say we are political parties, but basically in the country we are not recognized. So we cannot even go for elections and elect our own candidates to go and represent us in parliament and also in government. So I think that's the basic one. So how we want to be governed, then it will be basically upon the Swazis then to make a decision. So through the dialogue, I'm hoping that we are going to sit down around the table and discuss, because we can all see that the current government has dismally failed, and it's also illegitimate because it's not representing the people of Eswatini.
Yes, but is there kind of a broad alliance that in which you're partly involved, one which has also issued a clear statement along the lines you've indicated? Is there something on the table, one which can receive the support of the region, around which pressure can be placed on the king to concede? We want to see whether there are possibilities of capitalizing, of making good the little good we can make. We don't want the assassination of Thulani to be forgotten so soon as others have been forgotten, already, as you mentioned. And Mark mentioned the 80 protesters who were killed in 2021. We must use that backdrop to put pressure towards a viable alternative. Is there anything you can say along those lines before I move to the next person?
Yes, in my party, we are part of MSF, which is a multi-stakeholder forum, which was chaired by Thulani Maseko. Unfortunately, now he's late, but we have that group of organizations that are seeking democracy in Swaziland. And within that organization, we are one voice that is speaking to the world about democratization of Swaziland.
Thanks, Busi. We'll come back to you. Let me move now to Emmanuel. Emmanuel, just to follow on what Busi has been saying, first and foremost, what is being done about justice, as Mark has indicated? Is there any movement or pressure towards an International Commission of Inquiry into the murder of Thulani? A commission of inquiry that can also include investigating the deaths of other citizens who have been likewise murdered in Eswatini. And secondly, as the multi-stakeholders forum to which Bruce has made reference, we want to share with us the trajectory of the expectations that you have on the table so that we bring some kind of political solution to the crisis in Eswatini. Emmanuel. Emmanuel.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I was muted. I would like to welcome everyone who is part of this conversation this evening. I indeed come from the MSF. Thulani was my chair, and we are indeed pleading from losing a leader of his caliber. But at the same time, we're not going to put our spears down. We're going to be charged because we have no alternative as a people. In terms of the inquiry that is being spoken about, our position is that this government cannot investigate itself. And therefore, we are calling for an independent, maybe SADC or UN-led investigation to look into this question. This government has failed to account for the over estimated 100 of citizens who died in June and beyond. All they did was to set up a fund for reconstruction. They have abandoned the humanity, Ubuntu, which as Africans we are grounded. We therefore call upon the international community, in particular SADC, as the frontline organization that all the other institutions are looking up to for leadership, that they should not bury their head in the sand. They should inform government that they want an independent investigation of Thulani. Otherwise, this government is not going to do it because it has not done it before with all the murders that have happened. And why should it do it now? Does it have the capacity? Does it have the political will? Because we all know that our suspicions is that they know about the death of Thulani. So we are really, that is our call. We are going to continue to mount this call in terms of all institutions, the SADC, the UN, and other bilaterals of this state to assist in this regard. MSF drafted the terms of reference for dialogue. We've put all our issues there. What needs to be, discussed in this dialogue, because we should not think that it is just a political problem only. It is manifesting itself in the social fabric of society. As currently there are no drugs in the health facilities, people are dying needlessly so because there's just no insulin for diabetic patients, and there is no antivenom, even in facilities where snakes are known to be problematic. So the urgency of our issue is just not the deterioration in the political space, but also the deterioration that is manifesting in the social side. If you go to the road, to the countryside, the roads, there is no maintenance of the roads. Our youth are not employed, they are not getting scholarships, there is just no hope, and there are suicides, and now society is turning on itself. You know, there's so much, you know, conflict amongst ourselves now, even as a nation, because we are so despondent, we've lost hope because of lack of leadership from government. So therefore, we are clear that the reform of the state of Swaziland is not just about political power, but we have to look at the economic side of things, because these people are looting the economy currently using the political power that they have. So we need to address the political situation. We need to address the social conditions of our people. We need also to address, of course, the economic side of things. So MSF is clear in terms of its agenda. We have our strategic plan in place that we can avail to any of the partners to look at how we want to you know, move things, because we believe in the MSF that dialogue is key. But what is frustrating, even as Prime Minister was coming back from Namibia, there is a narrative from government, one, that NGOs, for example, are funding terrorists, to the point that they are scaring now, you know, our donors. Now donors are scared to fund, you know, human rights activities in the country. And this is a, you know, a very serious situation, because they want to also weaken the civil society institutions. So not only by killing, you know, the defenders like Thulani, but also by strangulating and making sure that the resources, institutions are starved of resources. Like now, we in the MSF, we don't have even 1 cent to do our basic, even basic communication is a struggle, because we have to use our pockets just to communicate amongst ourselves, just to do whatever activity we want. So these are the realities that we face on the ground. And government is saying the dialogue was stopped because government cannot speak to terrorists. Is it correct that government now views all who call for democracy, for reform of the state as terrorists? Indeed, yes, because there are 2 members of parliament languishing in jail, is currently charged with terrorism, because they dared to call for a people's government. And to the current regime, that was a cardinal sin. Thank you.
Oh, Emmanuel, thank you very much for that very clear exposition. Just wanted to know how we can immediately deal with the 2 problems they've raised. One is to get the Commission of Inquiry going. What can we do from this meeting to assist you and assist all activists in Eswatini towards a Commission of Inquiry, which dare say would also help to highlight the problem of Eswatini. The second is, it appears to me that on the heels of the SADC summit, we should not only push for the Commission of Inquiry, but also perhaps a conference, the International Conference on Eswatini, towards some kind of political settlement along the lines of the document you referred to, and one to which Busi referred, so that we keep the pressure. Have you yet considered how we could move on those 2 fronts, the Commission of Inquiry and an international conference, which also would help to sensitize the donors to whom we have made reference? And I'm hoping that there are members from donor organizations on this platform now. I hope you have taken note of what Emmanuel has said, and I'm sure you will not give up supporting democratic struggles. And we, all of us on this platform, should find ways of assisting the MSF and other activists in Swaziland. But we need to find ways of putting pressure. I'm surprised that the Prime Minister of Eswatini would come back as buoyant as you suggested, when in fact they were pilloried in Namibia. And I think we need to keep that pressure as much as possible. But maybe before I come back to you, Emmanuel, go to Mulungusi, who has since joined us, the president of PEDUMO. Makanya, please.
Very much. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Good afternoon to thank you, Prof. Mabdaza. Good afternoon to everyone present here. And thank you very much for providing this platform where we can reflect on the life of Comrade Thulani. I want to also thank Comrade Mark for that incisive article he penned on who killed Thulani. I can't agree more. I also want, on behalf of my own organization and the people of Swaziland, thank each and every one of you present here and those that are not here for the outpouring love that we have shown us. It has indeed been overwhelming if one look at the condolences that we have received that have been expressed through various platforms. But I also want to say to the Maseko family, who may be present here, that deep as our grief is, we know that yours is even deeper. And we continue to extend our heartfelt condolences. I will go, Prof. Mdaza, to what exactly do I think needs to happen, because I don't think there would be any value in trying to repeat what my leaders have already said here. So I would go to say, what is it that we think that SADC can do? And of course, while we appreciate and welcome the communique from SADC, but we think that, like Mark and other speakers have already said, including yourself, there are other instruments at the position of SADC that they could have been considered in trying to ensure that there is justice. One can, for instance, think of what SADC did in the situation of Lesotho following the assassination of Mhau, where SADC did set an independent commission, investigative commission, that investigated the circumstances leading to the death of Mhau and the other military personnel there. And we think that they could have easily done that with the situation of Swaziland, because we don't believe that this government is capable of investigating itself. If one looks at what the state has attempted to do since the assassination of Comrade Thulani, we can see that they've embarked on a very intense miscommunication, to use the South African term Stratcom, where they've sort of tend to leak certain SMSs purported to be communique amongst leading activists, including myself, around the assassination of Thulani, effectively wanting to suggest that the assassination of Thulani had anything to do with infighting within the broader mass democratic movement. We are not surprised, because our own assessment is that they never understood how big a personality Thulani was. And it is your outpouring rage, solidarity, and support that has made them to embark on this frankly schizophrenic reaction of wanting to try and accuse some within the democratic movement of the assassination of Thulani. But I think also one would like to reflect on who Thulani was in the context of who killed Thulani, and attempt to answer the question that keeps on coming up. Why would they target Thulani? While in Namibia, I may I met one of the leading journalists of our country who happened to have been a co-accused in 2014 with Thulani Maseko. And he said this to me to say, you know, President, not that I'm saying you must die, but maybe if it was you, one was sort of going to try and rationalize why they would want to kill you because of your radical pronouncement. But one would never have thought that they would go for Thulani, because I think all of us accept that Thulani was a polished diplomat. In fact, I used to have a lot of run-ins with him in terms of how he always insisted when penning correspondences and communiques, including petition, under the MSF, in using very, very polite language, even to those that some of us felt very strongly that they don't deserve. But Thulani was a militant. And that's exactly the reason why they would have wanted to kill Thulani. Because Thulani, being a militant, understood that through his individual, or even at times in concert with some of us, he will act in a manner that is intended to bring influence and bring change. I can cite a number of instances where Comrade Thulani will singularly represent persecuted human rights activists, at times with the complete absence of advocacy work. It will just be Comrade Thulani and his client. And I have been referring to one instance of Comrade Sibiya, that Comrade Thulani represented so loyally until Comrade Sibiya was released. But also, Comrade Thulani did not just believe in making statements. He is one of the few senior leaders that you would always find him on the ground whenever the activities. It never mattered to Comrade Thulani how large is the crowd. What always drove him was the nobility of the cause. I have had the privilege, having known him for the many decades that I've known him, to have participated, particularly in the last few years, in many activities on the ground where he was there, and very difficult and dangerous strikes. But also Comrade Thulani was a militant because Comrade Thulani was a very communal leader. He insisted at all material times, despite holding the position of chairperson in the MSF, to be consultative, to a point where some of us will just accuse him of being afraid to take leadership responsibilities on small things such as invitations. Comrade Thulani would insist that such invitations and who is deployed there must be subjected to the collective view of all members of the MSF. And I think those are the attributes of Comrade Thulani that will always make him an outstanding leader, and a leader that we will miss, and miss his warmth, miss his willingness to always embrace even different views. One was looking back, for instance, at how we struggled to put together the MSF because of the divergence of views there. And with hindsight, one appreciates that had it not been the rare skill of Comrade Thulani, possibly the MSF would have long collapsed. But I think we cannot, colleagues, talk of Comrade Thulani outside the FPP. What is the FPP? Is the 5-point plan that Comrade Thulani always referred to wherever he was and he was making address, to say our guiding compass as the MSF remains the 5-point plan. What is entailed in the 5-point plan? Point number one, we have always said we were calling for an all-inclusive mediated political dialogue, which is why we think the SADC communique falls short, because it seems to want to entrust the very same government that is responsible for our misery, for initiating this political dialogue. Yet we were very clear in the MSF, and Comrade Thulani was unflinching on this, that the sort of all-inclusive dialogue we're looking for has to be mediated, because this government has lost all sort of authority, including moral authority, to be responsible for such a political dialogue. The second one, you spoke about the need for the unconditional unbanning of all political parties, including the criminalized political parties under the Suppression of Terrorism Act, which include the very same party that I belong to, PEDUMO. Point number 3, Comrade Thulani spoke about the need for the setting up of an interim transitional authority, because I think all of us accept in Swaziland that we cannot achieve any meaningful progress if we think we can still do things with this government that is not born out of the will of the people of Swaziland, but remains a government, a government that belongs to the king. We need to set up an authority that will enjoy the confidence and trust of all Swazi people, not that will suffer from the trust deficit, as it is the case with this one. We also said on point number 4, we need a new democratic constitution. And this becomes very important, because if one looks at the address of the Swaziland Prime Minister in the recently concluded SADC Troika Summit, he was very emphatic that anything that needs to happen in relation to any political engagement in Swaziland need to be locked in the 4 corners of the constitution. And the reason they insist on that is because they know that the current constitution secures every inch for royal supremacy. And there is absolutely no way we would be able to make any advances within the 4 corners of the current constitution. And that's why in our 5-point plan, we insist on a new democratic constitution. And we say on point number 5, it is this very same democratic constitution that will lead us into a multi-party dispensation underpinned by the rule of law. So under this new democratic constitution, we will then go to a democratic multi-party elections where we'll have this process. But maybe as I conclude, I want to emphasize this point. Comrade Thulani insisted that before we get there, we can't overlook the preconditions for such an inclusive dialogue. And more often than not, you find these preconditions being overlooked for the call for this inclusive dialogue. One of the things that we said on the 3 main preconditions, we said the unconditional release of all political prisoners, including obviously the incarcerated members of parliament and any other Swazi who may be in prison for political inspired offenses. They need to be released. We spoke up on number 2 about the unconditional safe return of all political prisoners. And we said on point number 3, because we foresaw a situation where there will be an increase in fabricated charges against our leaders that will force some of them to go to exile, but also some of them will be arrested. We said we need the withdrawal of all criminally charges that are politically motivated. It will be worth mentioning that colleagues will remember here that Thulani himself was a prisoner. The only difference is that it was his money that was in custody as he was out on bail on charges that dates back up to 2008. And we know that those are political inspired charges that are aimed at silencing the voices of those who are calling for democracy. We honestly think that what colleagues can do is to insist on SADC that it must not permit Swaziland to go to any elections this year without having first attended to the issues that one has just reflected on, because the danger that is about to happen in Swaziland, and the Prime Minister is on record, while we're having this reflection, the Prime Minister is addressing the nation on the radio station, talking about mainly 3 issues: elections, dialogue, and supposedly reporting back on the recently concluded SADC meeting. Government is on record to say the environment is conducive for elections, but it is not conducive for dialogue. And they know that once they go to elections, then they will start to say there is a new administration, let's give the new administration a chance to effect whatever changes that needs to take place. And it will be a great disservice to the sacrifices of Thulani if SADC allows Swaziland to go to the elections. And again, we can refer to how SADC said to Lesotho when it discouraged Lesotho to go to elections that were due before it undertook and complete a process that SADC had felt it is necessary for a smooth, sustainable, and long-term resolution of the Lesotho problem. So I think briefly, one would like to say, those are the things that we could possibly consider to say we need to push in honor of Comrade Thulani. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful, Ulungusi. I think you've said it all. The 5-point plan, the need to look at the Lesotho precedents in terms of attending immediately to the assassination of Thulani. You've also given us some indications, maybe answered Mark's question, who killed Thulani, but also why. He was a leader, as you have indicated, and we hope that you and other comrades will move very quickly to try and fill the void, because those who are against change, those who are against democracy, not only in Eswatini, but also all over the world, they always identify the kingpin or those who think they're kingpins and eliminate them. The 5-point plan, I think, constitutes a very important document. I would like you to share that with us. We especially in Zimbabwe, where we have a very similar, if not parallel, situation, including the call for a transitional authority, and I'm sure Zimbabweans on this platform will come in on that. We also note the 3 conditionalities or unconditionalities: unconditional release of all political prisoners, unconditional return of exiles, withdrawal of political related charges. I think you have outlined everything in a very cogent fashion. And now I'll be coming back to you, but in the meantime, I will welcome comments, questions. And in doing so, I want to acknowledge that this panel has been wonderful in outlining the issues and offering and affording us different perspectives, reactions to what has just happened, and what the challenges in Eswatini, and how we in the region and beyond can assist. So, comments? Let's raise your hand. I don't want to start calling out names, but I see many interested parties here in Eswatini and in the region. Anyone to come on board?
Zodwa.
Zodwa coming? Zodwa?
Zodwa, Venetia, Severin, in that order.
I don't see the names. I don't see the hands. Zodwa. Zodwa in?
Ibo,
Zodwa.
open your...
Is
Look at the
Zodwa there?
top.
Yeah, there I see Venetia and Severin, but I don't see Zodwa, whom we mentioned first.
She's gone.
Venetia?
She's gone. So Venetia.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Ibo. It's good to see you all again. It's a pity the circumstances we find ourselves, but nevertheless, maybe just to say that I don't think necessarily is the last person or the last one to be assassinated in Swaziland. I think that for those of us that have always been solidarity activists, the fear is that I think there will be many more.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've tried everything.
Carry on, Venetia.
Okay, so I'm going to put my video off. It's just jumping about a bit. I think there'll be many more. And my fear is that, you know, we didn't respond in time. We knew that people like Thulani were under some threat. And I think as we sit back, you just hope that we don't make the same mistake of recognizing that there are a number of other activists that actually could be attacked. I mean, as there were a number of activists that were attacked before Thulani was killed. Thulani is such a symbol of, I think, every activist in our region. All of our governments, they have no patience with us. And I think they make no bones about it. My feeling as well is, you know, with the list and with the input that Mlungisi made, we can only really support that if we are able to do that as a region. Swaziland almost represents the last outpost in this region to actually not have a failed process. We tried for Zimbabwe so hard, and I think we failed on a number of levels. Swaziland remains the last one now, and I think as social justice activists, we really do need to look at how we begin to assist, and we can't do it with old thinking. It cannot happen with, you know, this ad hoc engagement from South Africa, from Zimbabwe. We actually do need a regional presence. We need to deal with these issues across our countries in a regional sort of way. How do you start
that, Venetia? We've been speaking about this for many decades, and in particular about the lethargy of South Africa as the hegemon of the region. And you are part of the civic movement in South Africa. Why is there such reluctance or apparent incapacity of South Africa taking the lead? We know SADC is largely a platitude, if I may say so. We know that South Africa is the leading factor in the region. Why is there such lethargy? You mentioned Swaziland now, but what about Zimbabwe as well? But why? Can you tell us why? Why South Africa is so lethargic? And why yourselves, the South Africa civil society, have also been lethargic in putting these things on the table?
I think there's been many shifts that have happened in South Africa, Ibo, and particularly after the COVID. Our civil society is very much reduced, but like Swaziland, a lot of our activists are also under attack on a very daily basis. There are huge battles happening in South Africa. We also have a situation where you have a very structured civil society where there are resources, and then we have the local movements that are developing in the country with very little resources. There's also, I think, the dearth of media. Much is happening, but our media is not covering very much of any of that. I think if you're looking at the dearth, not just of the South African civil society, but let's look at the South African government. I think our government's really struggling to determine what its own foreign policy is on not just Swaziland, but even Zimbabwe and beyond. I think it shows that our own politics in the country has reduced quite a bit. We've just come out of the ruling party's Congress where it was a bun fight. There were not even huge issues as this being discussed at that level. But there's also our interests of South Africa in all of your countries. I mean, the number of South African businesses in Swaziland, MTN, who at this stage, if there are any issues, will just shut off the service. We haven't even acted on that. So I do agree with you. I think this actually ought to be a call that something needs to be done from South Africa or yeah, we have another failed possibility in Swaziland, and the next will be South Africa.
Thanks, Venetia. Severin, and I did see Zod was a hand up earlier. Zod will come back after Severin.
Okay. Thank you. I think what maybe first need to be done is maybe to have the civil society try to speak to the chairperson with his group of the Troika and the Southern Africa, the SADC Troika, to speak, to engage them, that they have to find a sort of a mediator from different countries that will mediate the issue of Swaziland. But to give it to the Swaziland itself, then it will mean nothing. Secondly, what I think also, to make SADC and AU and UN to respond to the outcry of people, unless people have to organize in a smaller group, also to carry out attack on the government, especially the royal family, then the government will listen. Then the SADC will also listen. Then they will intervene. I know life will be lost, but although even if they cannot do that, but people are being killed. If somebody is killing you, you also have to use all means also to retaliate, also to respond with fire, because you are receiving fire, you must also try to respond with fire. Those are the issues we have to look at, because a lot of message of condolences, whatever, it will not even yield any result, but we need to respond with fire. Thank you.
Thank you, Severin. Siabata Mutsami.
Thank you very much, Doc. Comrades, colleagues. I should first really to extend also our condolences to the Thulani family, and also to all the Swazis, and also everybody in the region. I think the death of Thulani has hit much on most of us. The last meeting that we held, that's when we hosted them here in Lesotho, an activity that also raised some challenges between the government of Lesotho and Eswatini in terms of that trip. But anyway, we remain strong on that issue, that we want to see dialogue in Eswatini, in the multi-dialogue, that everybody will contribute to the future of the country. I think I want just to come into the issue of where do we go from here. Firstly, we need to keep more pressure on the SADC in terms of the investigation on the death of Comrade Thulani. We need to put more pressure, really write directly to the SADC or to the chairperson of the Troika, continue to engage. I think for that, in that case, I have seen that the SADC Council of NGOs have already initiated the process to engage, but we need more capacity in terms of the support so that we are able to move towards that. But also us in different countries in the region to petition our governments on the question of Eswatini. We need really to put more pressure on them so that they are able to see that the issues that are happening there, they need a transformation. We need to engage, and also to improve our activism as a region. I think we need to have two-pronged strategy, the one of activism, the one of engagement, so that if we pull them together, we'll be able to see that we at least one way or the other, there will be some an opening in the processes of democratic processes in Eswatini. I think that's what I just to contribute to Doc, to say that let's continue to engage more and more. You have raised one quite good point when you are saying we need to internationalize the struggle of Eswatini in terms of your talk about the international conference, but also the international lobbying around the world. It is important that we engage to that, so that Eswatini progressively should be excluded in some of the international activities. I think if we take it that way, it will be much better. They can't, I think them together with the Taiwan, they can't beat all of us if we put together what we need to do. Let's look at it in that way, and then we try to eliminate them internationally in terms of the platforms that they normally enjoy, and then we should be seen and be visible. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ntate. We'll come back to that. I've taken note of your suggestions, and something we want to discuss briefly the last 10 minutes of this discussion. But let me move to Vuyiswa Maseko. You obviously relation of Thulani. Please come.
Thank you, Chair, for the session. This is a very wonderful session. You have given the opportunities to put it to us. What I could add on behalf of the Communist Party of Swaziland, an organization, also in the mass democratic movement. We, as the Communist Party of Swaziland, we join the justice and peace-loving people of Swaziland and the world in mourning the brutal and tragic assassination of human rights lawyer, Advocate Thulani Maseko, who was born on the 1st of March 1970 and passed on the 21st of January 2023. As the CPS, we convey our deepest condolences to the Maseko family, particularly his wife, Janet, as well as his children who could do nothing but watch as he breathed his last. We as the CPS convey its condolences to the People's United Democratic Movement, of which he was a member, the entire liberation movement of Swaziland. Unarmed, Maseko was murdered by the regime's mercenaries at his home in Galuhleko, nearby Mhlambanyatsi, about 18 kilometers southwest of the capital, Mbabane. The murder of Maseko by the Mswati autocrats followed a public declaration by Africa's last absolute monarch, Mswati the Dead, on saying that he would continue using mercenaries to kill democracy activists. A few hours after that declaration, Mswati's mercenaries murdered Advocate Maseko. Advocate Maseko's blood is in Mswati's hands, just as our first speaker, Comrade Mark, alluded on that who killed Thulani. Mswati killed Thulani, and he must be held accountable for Maseko's murder, including the murder of over 100 Swazis from 29 June 2021 and many before that. Advocate Thulani Maseko utilized his legal skills to fight for the democratization of Swaziland. His only crime against the regime was the utilization of to call for democracy. In 2014, he was sentenced to 2 years for criticizing the judiciary for its endorsement of oppression, including the stifling of people's voices. Previously, in 2009, he was arrested under the Discredited Suppression of Terrorism Act of 2008 and later faced charges under the Sedition Act for raising his voice in the call for the unbanning of political parties and the democratization of the country. The murder of Advocate Thulani Maseko proves the CPS statements that Mswati autocracy is not, and indeed has never been, willing to engage in any meaningful dialogue towards the democratization of the country. The CPS is on record stating that under the current circumstances, democracy in Swaziland will be achieved only by rendering the Mswati regime unworkable, making all of the organs ungovernable in the year 2023. This must necessarily include ensuring that the regime does not celebrate its 50th anniversary since the imposition of the state of emergency on the 12th of April 1973, as well as running an intense campaign to boycott, disrupt, and stop these shambling elections. As such, the imperative to build the resistance movement and fight to achieve democracy now is now more urgent than ever. In paying tribute to Advocate Thulani Maseko, the CPS calls for principled unity within the mass democratic movement. The Mswati regime has shown its true colors, that it will go to extreme lengths to protect its dictatorship. As such, the CPS calls upon the people of Swaziland to draw a clear line between those who fight for total democracy and those whose objective is to maintain the system. There must be no middle road in the struggle against absolute monarchy rule. The CPS reiterates its call for the establishment of community councils, including the security councils for the people to adequately defend themselves against the regime's major security forces. In conclusion, the abnormality of the current situation must be practically felt by the autocrats. The revolutionary fire must rise and burn down the entire system. Amanda, comrades. Thank you very much, Comrade Chairperson.
Thanks for your views, sir. Thank you. While I call on Tony to come in just now, I want just to warn the panelists that I'll be coming back to you. Beginning with Busi, just to reflect on the points being made here, but also in particular to the 5-point plan, which Makanya outlined so well, and also the recommendations made by Siabata from Lesotho. So just to warn you, I'll be coming to each of you, and then I'll end up with Mark to summarize our discussion, and in particular, the way forward from here. We want to say that we at the Surface Trust is a regional organization, as you know. We are also engaged on the Zimbabwe situation, which is very similar to the Eswatini one, in an amazing fashion. And we would like to engage with the comrades here from Eswatini after this meeting in the coming few days to see how we can strategize and see how we can move in a manner that elicits the requisite response from the region and from South Africa in particular. So, Tony.
Thank you, Ibo. Just to warn you, Mark has left, I'm afraid, so he won't be able to summarize for you. But just quickly, perhaps we can get the resolution that you're talking about around the 5-point plan, and perhaps a way to do that is to ask people to put their hands up if they basically think that's a good idea. That would give us, in virtual meetings, it's very difficult to get a show of hands, but perhaps we can do that. The suggestion is that everybody who thinks that 5-point plan is the way forward, perhaps they could all put their hands up towards the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, Zodwa.
Thank you, Ibo. Thank you for giving us this wonderful opportunity to talk to Africa and the world. I want to speak as an activist in Swaziland. We have soldiers, we have mercenaries, we have police, special police units that are following activists every day when we come out in protest, such that the Swazi people are now very much afraid to be out. Just on Tuesday, we were in court because the incarcerated MPs were appearing for their final appearance in court, but no activists showed up because they understand and realize that the government is very, very brutal. When we go out there and we protest, we have the soldiers and the special police units attacking us, gunning us down. It is for this reason that, therefore, our plea would be that we have either from the UN, their peacekeeping force to come into Swaziland and remove all the state agents that are brutalizing us. Thank you.
Thanks, Zodwa. I saw Zamchia's hand up. Zamchia.
Thanks, Ibo. I was just voting to the 5-point plan.
Okay, great. In that case, and let's say the other hands other than the panelists, I will come down to Busi to respond and to conclude from my point of view on how we should proceed. Busi? Is Busi still there? Busi? Mulungusi, maybe he's not ready. I'll then go to Emmanuel in the meantime. Emmanuel.
Thank you very much. I think we appreciate the inputs, the ideas that have been shared in this platform tonight. Our call is very clear. We need to engage as a nation. We used to think we're exceptional, that we're one people, one nation, one language, we're interrelated. All that has gone into the air because the reality has hit us that we can be killed by our very own security forces that are paid by ourselves. So we need, I think the president has articulated well and reminded us of the 5-point plan that we think the mass democratic movement and Thulani represented in particular as our marching orders going forward. So we really will appreciate the amplification of the preconditions and the 5-point plan. I think those are crucial. And of course, I think the call for an international conference is in line with our resolution in our December conference, where Thulani was elected as chairman of the MSF, that we need this conference as a matter of urgency, which means we need your assistance and all the partners to mobilize resources so that we can gather Swazis, pass them somewhere together with those in diaspora and our partners and sympathizers across the globe to meet and really envision the new Swaziland we want. I have said, and I want to reiterate once again, that this call for change is for the survival of ordinary people on the ground who are struggling to make ends meet, because the state now uses every resource for security and for protecting itself, whilst they are also benefiting from the economy. So we really need that kind of support. And I want to echo Godwa as well, that we need SADC. If SADC is serious, they must deploy an envoy to this country and security people who will come here and monitor the situation for themselves and give assurance to the activists and Emaswat in general that they are concerned about our welfare. So we need that kind of support in order to ensure that we are protected as a nation. I really want to thank everyone, and I think that it should not just be a talk show. We should move forward with some of the ideas so that we can work out a clear program going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Emmanuel. Thanks very much. I'll have occasion to thank you at the end of this. But in the meantime, I'll bring back Mulungusi Makanya, and just to remind him of what Bihata from Lesotho recommended, more or less recommending what we were reinforcing what we mentioned earlier, which is the agency of a commission of inquiry into the assassination of Thulani, but also immediately, if I take it also from what Emmanuel just said, immediately for the Eswatini comrades to put together a document and approach, and not only approach, but travel to Zambia to see President Richie Lema and get him as a head of Troika to institute a special mission to Lesotho, to Eswatini, along the Lesotho president as a matter of urgency. And of course, the reference to the transitional authority and also the international conference. But I leave that to Mulungusi now to more or less summarize for us on the way forward. If you may, please, Mulungusi.
Thank you very much, Prof. Maybe let me, from the outset, state that I fully agree with the suggestion for an international conference. I fully embrace all the positive suggestions that have been made here, including the urgent need to reach out to President HH. But what is happening to me is the knowledge that this reflection is not just about Thulani the individual, because Thulani represented something bigger than just himself. Thulani represented all the Swazis who have been made to be faceless and nameless, who have died under this regime. And we always say Thulani and all the other Swazis gave their lives for the most treasured values of our revolution. And one will briefly reflect on what are those treasured values. But I just wanted to overemphasize this point that as everyone who has spoken here has indicated, the situation in Swaziland continues to deteriorate. And as the situation deteriorates, particularly the safety and security situation, it is logic to then understand that it will mean that there will be an increase in the number of Swazis who will be seeking asylum and safety, running away from possible death or imprisonment. We want to appeal to all comrades on this platform to try and urge their governments to consider favorably asylum application that will be coming from activists who will be running away from Swaziland. More so because one of the things that one realized in Namibia, and it was confirmed by one of the leaders that we met in Namibia, that we seem not to have enough boots on the ground who are able to tell the Swazi story, because people tend to sympathize and empathize with stories they know. So yes, we have ambassadors in all of you who are present here, but we think that there is a need for a physical presence of many Swazis in all the countries of SADC to adequately tell the Swazi story. And then what are the values of the revolution that Thulani and the many other patriots laid their lives for? These are the values of dignity. Thulani was very, very, very adamant on the need to accord and respect the dignity of each and every Swazi, irrespective of his class, irrespective of his gender, irrespective of his social station in life. Thulani was very particular about reminding us always that the Swazi struggle is not wedged in isolation. It is part of an international struggle to bring about a humane world where the rule of law, not the rule by law, as Mark adequately pointed out earlier, is going to observe. Thulani was concerned about the suffering of the people of the Palestine. Comrade Thulani was concerned about the suffering of the people of Palestine. But most importantly, Comrade Thulani was deeply, deeply troubled by what continues to be happening in Zimbabwe, particularly the persecution and arrest of not just members of parliament there, but of activists of the opposition party and other human rights defenders. So I think that we need to embrace and ensure that the values that Comrade Thulani lived for, suffered for, and ultimately died for are values that all of us continue to take. We need, with your assistance, to help us to reach all corners of the region and the continent, and if the world, if needs be, to continue to tell the story of Thulani as it embodies and represents the story of the oppressed people of Swaziland. But thank you very much for this opportunity, and we look forward to interacting with you bilaterally to try and see how quickly we can consolidate this clear document that will be taking to SADC, the AU, and the rest of the world around where to from here. Thank you very much, Prof.
Yeah, maybe just before you go, just to outline again quickly the 5-point plan, and including the plan of action immediate, as I've just outlined. And we'd like to see the House respond to that. Carry on.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. I think what we said on the 5 points plan, and like we had requested earlier, we will be sharing them with yourself. We said in the 5 points plan, the first demand on the 5 points plan that we're talking about, we spoke about an all-inclusive mediated political dialogue. All-inclusive mediated political dialogue. We do not believe for a moment that there could be any meaningful dialogue in Swaziland if it's not mediated by an external, independent, and objective party. We said point number 2, we speak about the unconditional unbanning of all political parties, including the criminalized political parties under the Suppression of Terrorism Act. That will include the party that I belong to, PEDUMO, its Youth League, SWAYOCO, and other organizations that are criminalized under the Suppression of Terrorism Act. We said our point number 3 speaks to the need for the setting up of an interim transitional authority that is going to enjoy the full confidence and support of all the Swazi people. The Swazi people do not see themselves in the current government, because this is not the government of the people of Swaziland. This is the government of the king. And then we said our point number 4, we speak about the need for a new democratic constitution that is going to guarantee inviolably so the rights of the Swazi people, and a constitution through which we're going to be led to point number 5, which will be the holding of free, fair, democratic election that will see the introduction of a multi-party dispensation underpinned by the rule of law, where all of us are going to be subject of law, and no single individual will be above law, as is the case currently.
Thanks, Mlungusi. Thanks very much. The House, we just seek your endorsement that hereby we support the 5-point plan. Number 2, that we support the comrades from Eswatini with respect to the immediate plan to approach the Troika or SADC through the Troika. And 3, that we, as SAPES here, as part of our role as a regional organization, engage the Eswatini comrades towards these various points that Mlungusi has indicated, including and not excluding the other issues, but including the Agency for International Conference, through which conference the 5-point plan can be put into effect. I take it, put up your hands if you all agree. I take it. I also want to mention that this session is recorded. It's on Facebook as well. It will be tomorrow on YouTube. I have to defer and acknowledge the hands just gone up. There's Munjozi, Mandla, Jennifer, Mohammed Katerere, and Patricia. And Nolwazi. Please come in. Let's begin with Josie, Mandla, Jennifer, Patricia, and Nolwazi, in that order. Mandla.
Thank you, Prof, and thank you for this platform. I think it's very important for us to keep reflecting, but also find ways of how we can increase the momentum for the struggle of the people of Swaziland. And of course, I want to as well pass my condolences to Comrade Thulani's family and the entire progressive world, because I think that the loss is huge and the gap he leaves will be difficult to fill. I think that President Makanya and many of the speakers have given us clarity in terms of where we are with regard to the struggle of the people of Swaziland, but in terms of where we need to go. And I totally agree with the points that you raise as things that we should pursue as we move forward. But also I wanted to add that one of the things we need to be able to push for is for SADC to be accountable to the citizens of this region. SADC has sent a couple of envoys into Swaziland. The first one was led by Dr. Kwape when he was when Botswana was chairing the Troika. And I think that one of the things we need to be able to push is to get the full reports of those two envoys that were sent into Swaziland. And thirdly, I think we must find ways, even as we push SADC, to be able to take Mswati on his word, but also they must respect their communique. In Kinshasa, SADC told us that they were going to have an immediate or an urgent extraordinary summit on Swaziland. It has taken more than 6 months for that extraordinary summit to happen. And there is no official communication in terms of why it's not happening. I mean, in terms of good reasons, not what we read on the media or what is said in passing. So my two key points, Prof, is that number one, we need to demand the reports by the envoys that went into Swaziland and in a way got Mswati to commit to the SADC leadership that he was going to institute a dialogue process, which he has since reneged on. We need those reports in their totality. And secondly, SADC must honor their own resolutions and their own commitments. So I think it's, as President Makanya put it, it is not just the people of Swaziland or our collectiveness as a region in terms of regional citizens and civil society, but we also need individual organizations in country, civil society, to be able to put pressure, and I mean massive pressure through demonstrations to push their governments to respond to the challenges in Swaziland. There are key events that we have always seen across the region, especially from South Africa and from the people of Swaziland themselves. We have those calendar dates, the 29th of June massacre commemorations, any other calendar events that the people of Swaziland have put as markers for their struggle. I think that we need to be able to conscientize ourselves as a region and take up these solidarity efforts in our countries as they demonstrate in their country on the borders. We need to do it across the region. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much. I take the hands really well, hands in support of the resolution as read out by Mulungusi and as also as summarized by myself. It's not necessary to speak. I take it. The House supports the resolution so read out by Mulungusi, Makanya, and summarized by myself. Is that in order?
Yes.
Fine.
There's only one element of the resolution, Chair, that is missing. There was a motivation for some kind of peace monitoring mechanisms to be explored, given the level of insecurity in Swaziland. And I will suggest that we include it in the resolutions that are being proposed. On the whole, I was just raising my hand to support the resolutions that were being moved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would you agree that the approach to the Troika would include that request for peacekeeping? Well, as I know, the UN and other international organizations will always defer to SADC. So as I take it, we begin with the Troika and see how they can come, and also the idea of SADC envoys going into Eswatini as matter of urgency. along the Lesotho president. So I take it, and perhaps I can close the meeting now on having agreed on a way forward, that after this meeting we'll be engaging with our Eswatini colleagues and help in planning the way forward, beginning with the approach to the tracker. And
sorry, Chair.
Fine.
Yes. Sorry, Doc. I was just adding on the resolutions in terms of as the way forward to try to consolidate or to also to work together with other forces in the region as we move together with this agenda. I submit.
Thank you very much. On that note, I wish to close the meeting and first and foremost to say this has been a very constructive meeting. We don't usually end with such strong resolution, or at least with a point at a well-defined trajectory. But such is the urgency of the situation in Eswatini, and such is the importance of marking, as we do, the brutal murder of Thulani, that we are taking action as Eswatini citizens, but also as regional citizens. And secondly, to thank my very able panel. Mark, who has left us now to go to another meeting, but Busi, Emmanuel, and Mulungusi, thank you very much indeed. You will be in touch tomorrow, and we will, as I said, this recording will be on YouTube tomorrow. We'll get it to you, and we must be seen to act and act urgently. Thank you.
Avoti tango ekomaka, kaina komi moto, ona